Min tightened the apron around his waist as the aroma of fresh herbs and simmering broth filled the kitchen. It was a Saturday evening, and his wife, Tao, was in the living room helping their daughter practice calligraphy. The scene was domestic, serene, exactly how Min's family liked to project themselves. Yet, he found his eyes straying to the clock, counting the minutes until Vu would arrive. Vu, his closest friend, was practically family now. Min's parents adored him, often joking about how lucky Min was to have such a loyal companion. Tao welcomed Vu warmly, grateful for the help he often provided around the house. But Min knew the truth. Their bond had grown far beyond the realm of friendship. The doorbell rang, and Min's pulse quickened. He wiped his hands on a towel and called out, "I'll get it." Tao barely looked up from their daughter's work as Min moved to the door, composing himself before opening it. Vu stood on the threshold, dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark jeans. His ever-present smile lit up his sharp features, but there was a quiet intensity in his eyes that Min had grown to recognize. They exchanged a quick nod, a gesture laden with unspoken understanding. "Come in," Min said, stepping aside. As Vu entered, he greeted everyone with practiced ease. Tao teased him about his punctuality while their daughter giggled as Vu playfully ruffled her hair. It was effortless, the way he fit into their lives. Min admired Vu's ability to maintain the illusion of friendship, even as the weight of their secret threatened to crack the surface. Later, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Vu's presence was magnetic. He shared a story about a recent trip to the countryside, his voice animated, hands gesturing vividly. The others laughed, enraptured by his charm, but Min stayed quiet, observing the man he couldn't seem to stay away from. When the meal ended, Tao insisted Vu stay for tea. Min offered to prepare it, and Vu followed him into the kitchen under the pretense of helping. "You've been quiet tonight," Vu said, his voice low, meant only for Min. Min didn't look up from the teapot. "It's risky, you coming here so often?" Vu leaned against the counter, his tone softening. "It's worth the risk, isn't it?" The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Min hesitated, then glanced at Vu. Their eyes met, and for a fleeting moment, the noise of the house faded away. Vu's expression was steady, unyielding, as if daring Min to deny what they both felt. "Go back," Min whispered, breaking the spell. "Before someone notices." Vu smirked but obeyed, slipping back into the living room with a casual ease that belied the tension simmering beneath the surface. Min stayed behind for a moment, gripping the counter as guilt and longing warred within him. In the next room, laughter resumed, but for Min, the evening had already shifted, marked by a secret neither man could escape. The moon hung low over the quiet village as Min walked along the narrow dirt path leading to the river. His footsteps were deliberate, the soft crunch of gravel beneath his shoes the only sound breaking the stillness. Vu had suggested they meet here, away from the prying eyes of family and neighbors. Min had hesitated but found himself coming anyway, his resolve weaker than he liked to admit. Vu was already there, leaning casually against a tree by the water's edge. The silver light of the moon outlined his silhouette, making him appear almost ethereal. Min stopped a few paces away, his heart racing. "You came," Vu said, his voice carrying a mixture of relief and triumph. "I shouldn't have," Min replied, though he made no move to leave. Vu smiled, a knowing expression that both infuriated and disarmed Min. "But you did." The tension between them was palpable as Vu stepped closer, the air charged with something neither could name but both understood. For a moment, neither spoke, the silence broken only by the gentle lapping of the river against the shore. "You've been avoiding me," Vu said finally, his tone light but his eyes searching. "I've been busy," Min lied, folding his arms as if to shield himself from Vu's gaze. "With your family I know," Vu said, his voice dropping. "But don't pretend that's the only reason." Min sighed, his shoulders slumping. Whatever this is, it's dangerous. My wife, my daughter, they trust me. And you think this makes you unworthy of their trust?" Vu's question was sharp, his expression unyielding. "You can love them and still want more, Min. You're human." Min looked away, ashamed yet unable to refute the truth in Vu's words. For all the love he had for his family, There was a part of him that felt incomplete, as though something essential had been buried under years of expectation and duty. Vu took another step forward, closing the distance between them. "You don't have to carry this alone," he said softly. "I'm here." Min turned to face him, his defenses crumbling under the weight of Vu's sincerity. It was a dangerous moment, one that teetered on the edge of no return. When Vu reached out, placing a hand on Min's shoulder, Min didn't pull away. "Someone will see us," Min said, his voice barely audible. "No one's here," Vu replied. "Just us." The words were both a reassurance and a temptation. Min felt the pull of Vu's presence, the undeniable connection they shared. Slowly, hesitantly, he let himself lean into Vu's touch. It was fleeting, just a moment in the quiet night, but it was enough to solidify what they both already knew. As they parted, the weight of their actions hung heavy between them, but so did the promise of something neither could ignore. The path back to their separate lives loomed, but neither man was ready to walk it yet. Min sat at the dining table, his hands resting on the wood, his eyes fixed on the steam rising from his untouched cup of tea. The hum of the evening surrounded him. Tao in the kitchen washing dishes, their daughter humming as she colored by the window. Yet Min felt disconnected, as though he were watching his life unfold from the outside. It had been days since his meeting with Vu at the river, but the memory lingered, sharp and vivid. He had told himself it was the last time, but every stolen glance, every brush of their hands when Vu visited, threatened to unravel his resolve. "You've been quiet lately," Tao said, breaking the silence as she joined him at the table. She tilted her head, studying him with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Is something bothering you?" Min forced a smile, shaking his head. "Just tired from work. Nothing to worry about." Tao's gaze lingered, as if she could see the cracks beneath his facade. "You work too hard. Maybe Vu can help out more, he's always offering." The mention of Vu's name sent a jolt through Min. He nodded quickly, eager to shift the conversation. "I'll ask him." The next evening, Vu arrived unannounced, carrying a bag of fresh vegetables from the market. Tao welcomed him with her usual warmth, and their daughter ran to greet him, wrapping her arms around his legs. Min lingered by the door, his stomach twisting in equal parts anticipation and dread. As the night wore on, Min grew increasingly aware of how closely Vu's presence intertwined with their family life. Vu joked with Tao, helped their daughter with her homework, and even offered to repair a squeaky cabinet hinge. To an outsider, it was the picture of friendship and harmony. To Min, it was a knife twisting deeper. Later, as the family settled in the living room, Min excused himself to the kitchen, unable to bear the weight of his emotions. Vu followed, his steps deliberate and measured. "You're avoiding me again," Vu said quietly, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Not here," Min hissed, glancing toward the doorway. "Not now." Vu stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "You can't keep pretending this isn't happening, Min. It's tearing you apart." Before Min could respond, a shadow moved in the doorway. His younger brother, Due, stood there, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What's going on?" Min froze, his mind scrambling for an explanation. "Nothing," he said quickly, his voice too loud, too forced. "Vu was just helping me with something." Dewey's eyes flicked between them, suspicion flickering but not fully forming. "Right? Well, Mom's asking for you, Vu." Vu nodded, brushing past Min without another word. Min's heart pounded as he leaned against the counter, the weight of their secret now threatening to break free. The night resumed, but the balance had shifted. The cracks were no longer invisible, and Min knew it was only a matter of time before the fragile facade shattered completely. The silence in the house was heavier than usual. Min sat at the edge of his bed, the faint glow of his phone casting shadows across his face. A message from Vu sat unopened on the screen, its words previewed just enough to unsettle him. "We need to talk. I can't keep doing this." His thumb hovered over the notification, but before he could act, Tao appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. She held a slip of paper in her hand, a note Min hadn't realized had slipped from his jacket earlier that evening. "What is this?" she asked, her voice soft but trembling. Min's heart sank as he recognized Vu's handwriting, the message scrawled in a moment of reckless urgency. He stood slowly reaching for the note, but Tao stepped back. "I didn't mean for you to find that," Min said, his voice cracking under the weight of his guilt. Tao's eyes filled with tears. "Then who was it meant for, Min?" "Him." Min's throat tightened as he struggled for words. "It's complicated." "That's not an answer," she snapped, the pain in her voice cutting through him like a blade. "You've been distant, distracted, and now this. Tell me the truth." He looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "I didn't want to hurt you," he admitted. "I didn't want any of this to happen." The room fell into an unbearable silence. Tao finally sat down, clutching the note as though it might provide answers. "Do you love him?" The question struck Min like a thunderclap. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The truth sat heavy on his tongue, and for the first time he couldn't deny it, not to himself and not to her. "Yes," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "But I love you too. I love our family." Tao's tears fell freely now. "How can you say that when you've betrayed us?" Min dropped to his knees, his hands trembling. "I don't know how to explain it. I never wanted to hurt you, but I couldn't stop what I feel. I'm so sorry, Tao." She didn't respond, only stood and left the room, leaving Min alone with his shame. Later that night, Min found himself at the riverside, where Vu was waiting. The moonlight reflected off the water, casting an eerie glow over their meeting. "She knows," Min said without preamble. Vu's expression softened, though pain flickered in his eyes. "And now?" "I don't know what to do," Min admitted. "I can't leave my family. But I can't keep lying to them, or to myself." Vu stepped closer, his voice steady. "Then maybe it's time we stopped pretending this can work. I can't ask you to choose, Min. You already have." The words hung heavy between them. Min felt the sting of Vu's honesty but knew he was right. Without another word, Vu turned and walked away, his silhouette fading into the shadows. Alone by the river, Min stared at the water, the weight of his decisions pressing down on him. He had chosen his family, but in doing so, he had lost a part of himself, and the man who had shown him what it meant to truly feel alive. The night stretched on, silent and unforgiving, as Min wrestled with the emptiness left in Vu's absence. Days turned into weeks, and the weight of Min's confession lingered like a storm cloud over his household. Tao moved through their home with a quiet determination, her words to Min measured and sparse. Their daughter, sensing the shift, asked innocently why her parents didn't laugh together as much anymore. Min, caught between guilt and longing, found no answer. Vu, for his part, had retreated entirely. There were no more late-night messages or unspoken glances exchanged in the safety of stolen moments. Min told himself it was for the best, though the absence left a hollow ache he couldn't shake. He buried himself in routine, work, family meals, helping his daughter with homework, but every mundane task seemed heavier, as though the life he had built was now a burden rather than a refuge. One evening, Tao called him to the kitchen. She sat at the table, her expression resolute but weary, a stack of papers in front of her. Min recognized them immediately: school drawings, family photos, mementos of the life they had shared. "Min," she began, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, "I've thought about what you said. About what's happened." He sat down slowly, his heart pounding. "I can't say I understand it," she continued. "And I don't know if I ever will. But I do know one thing. I deserve honesty. Our daughter deserves honesty." Min nodded, shame flooding him. "You're right. I should have told you the truth sooner." Tao held up a hand, silencing him. "This isn't just about the past, Min. It's about what comes next. Do you love him?" The question was direct, and Min felt its weight settle over him. He hesitated before answering, his voice low. "A part of me does. But that doesn't mean I don't love you or our family." Tao exhaled slowly, her eyes searching his face. "I believe you," she said finally. "But love isn't enough if it's built on lies. If we're going to move forward, things have to change." "What do you mean?" Min asked, his voice tinged with fear. "I mean we need space," she replied, her tone firm. "I need to figure out who I am outside of this, and you need to figure out what you really want." The words hit him like a blow, but he knew she was right. They couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. That night, Min packed a small bag and left the house, his daughter's tearful goodbye echoing in his ears. He didn't go to Vu, he knew that path was closed for now. Instead, he checked into a modest inn on the outskirts of the village, the solitude giving him time to confront the choices that had brought him here. As he stared out the window at the darkened streets, he thought of the life he had almost destroyed and the man who had shown him what it meant to truly feel. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Min understood that he had to face it alone, until he could decide who he truly was and where he belonged.